last quick thing you need to know about how the GPT family of models works is that they don't necessarily think in words. Instead, they operate using a system of tokens, where words are basically encoded. They're turned into these smaller pieces, a token, and these tokens often are actually full words, but for longer words, they'll be a portion of a word. On average, they're 4 English characters of text. So the sentence, "I like hamburgers," is split into 5 different tokens. I is one token, space like is another token, space hamb is another token, erg is a token, and ers is a token. And I'm not just making up these exact tokens. OpenAI actually has a tokenizer tool on their website that helps you visualize how text is encoded into tokens. However, it is not up to date. It only has GPT-3 in here. But if I put some text in there like, "Hello, everyone. How many tokens are in this sentence?" If I scroll down, it looks like, well, actually in this case, pretty much every word is its own token. Hello, and then space everyone, space how, space many. These are all individual tokens. But for whatever reason, if I do hamburger, you can see it is split into separate tokens. Again, this is specific to GPT-3. GPT-4 has its own encoding algorithm. There are ways of figuring out the tokens, but you really don't need to worry about it unless you're a developer and you're using the APIs, which is a lot of what we talk about in my course on using the GPT family of APIs. The reason I bring this up is that, first, it's just good to know, but more importantly, each model has a limit to how many tokens it can work with, and that includes both the input and the output. So if we go back to this slide here, where we talked about how GPT doesn't really have a memory, right? Instead, every message that we've ever typed to it within a conversation and every response it generated, they're all fed back to the model every time I add a new message, and then it responds. So each piece of text here is encoded into a certain number of tokens, and the response is a certain number of tokens. And each model has its own limit on the overall size of what we call the context window. How many tokens can the model work with? So these models currently can't take an entire book as an input. They can take a lot of text, especially GPT-4, but there is a limit, and I'll show you the limits in a moment. When I say context window, it's not just about the input that we provide or just the output. It's the total number of tokens from the input plus the output. That is the hard limit that we're working with anytime we have a conversation with ChatGPT or anytime we work with the models using their APIs. There is a limit on how many tokens the overall input plus output text have to be within. They don't do a great job talking about this for ChatGPT on their documentation, but if you go to the developer documentation, we can see that GPT-4 has a maximum context window of 8,000 tokens. There is a different version of GPT-4 that's not available right now to ChatGPT users that has a much larger context window. And if we look at 3.5, we're dealing with 4,096 tokens, so half the size as GPT-4. Later on, I'll show an example of hitting that context window limit and what happens if you have too much text that you're trying to work with. But for now, all you need to know is that there is a limit and that these models are not infinitely able to process text and generate text. There is a hard number on the number of not quite words, but the number of tokens that they can work with. That context window is the input plus the output combined. Something like this is well within that limit. You really have to start trying very hard to hit that limit, especially with GPT-4, which is something that I will try to do to demonstrate the context limit later on in the course.